Well, there's been an interesting development recently with the publication of Part 2 of the Childhood Obesity Plan. And Katrina and I thought that we would get together and just chat through some of the proposals that are in Part 2 of the plan. And Katrina, there's some quite interesting facts about advertising, first off.
I guess this is part of a trend we've been seeing in advertising for some time, that the rules are getting a lot stricter about what you can advertise, particularly if your product is high fat, salt or sugar. And it comes, I think, as no surprise, given what we saw for the last obesity strategy, that there's a feeling there's a gap that you can still have HFSS food advertised around family viewing. So there's a proposal to consult on the possibility of a watershed ban, which would be very significant because that would mean that manufacturers wouldn't have some really prime time advertising slots available to them. There's also, interestingly, a little bit of a nod in there where they talk about, oh, maybe this won't be done through the normal advertising codes, and maybe we will see a shift to actual regulation rather than self-regulation, which would be very significant more generally, because at the moment most of advertising is on the basis of self-regulation.
Very interesting. Is there anything in there about the cartoon characters? Is that part of it?
Well, do you know, it's funny that, because that was the other gap that was talked about a lot at the time, was the equity brand characters. So that'll be your like Snap, Crackle and Pop. So the ones that belong to the manufacturers. And when the first plan came out, a lot of interested parties said that this sort of disconnect, that you couldn't use licensed characters but you could continue to use equity brand characters, was maybe not defensible anymore. But interestingly, in this plan, what we hear is that there's no plans to change that. So it looks like Snap, Crackle and Pop may be with us for a little bit longer.
I mean, sugar is the big thing. When we talk about childhood obesity, although there's that focus also on salt and fat, and salt we've obviously had around for some time, fat really isn't getting that much of a mention.
Surprising, isn't it?
A little bit.
A little bit, but actually it's, even so far as we've gone beyond sugar, Public Health England is talking about reformulation on calories basis rather than on a fat basis. So fat is really surprisingly low.
Not mentioned.
Yes.
But sugar's there. And obviously we've had a target that was put to industry to try and hit a 20% sugar reduction in terms of reformulation, with a 5% target for the first year, which industry has missed. But I think it's right to say that's not without valiant effort, and there are a number of food manufacturers who really have put effort into reformulating their products and reducing the amount of sugar that's in it, but still the target's been missed.
The target has been missed, but you do need to bear in mind how long it takes to reformulate a product. And I think that when they did that review, which came out a couple of months ago, where they looked at that missed target, there was an acknowledgement that you don't reformulate products overnight. You know, this is something that takes months and months and months of development, and then even once you've got a product, to actually get it into store, that takes time. So it has been missed, and 2% is obviously disappointing, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a lot in the pipeline that's coming through.
That's true, and I think the government have tried to sort of encourage that. I mean, one of the ways, of course, that they have is by introducing the soft drinks levy.
Yes.
And that is, I think it's been dubbed the most unsuccessful tax in history, because manufacturers have actually taken the steps so that their product is going to be below the threshold, so that they don't need to pay the tax. I think what's interesting in Part 2 of the obesity plan are some of the proposals to extend that out beyond soft drinks, so looking particularly at milk-based drinks, which of course was very controversial at the time, particularly for children, and the benefits that there are in terms of drinking milk products.
And that, of course, was the justification for the exception.
But the consultation's coming out on that, and so I think it's something that has been kicked around for a long period of time, and perhaps industry should expect that there's likely to be a similar ban that's imposed.
Yes, or at least that they're going to have to respond to that consultation and argue the case for dairy products quite strongly to avoid it.
I agree. The other sort of comment I think that's made in there is, there's a hope that industry will respond to all of this on a voluntary basis. But there is that line in there that actually they will not shy away from mandatory or fiscal levers to try and achieve their aims. So, I think industry should bear in mind that government and Public Health England will be watching very closely.
Yes.
And at the moment, despite not hitting the target, things are moving in the right direction, but it should not come as a surprise to anybody if in fact there's more regulatory burden that's imposed at some point in the future.
Or more tax.
Or more tax.
There has been speculation for a long time that potentially the sugar levy could be expanded to other high sugar categories, confectionery and such like. And it's if the sugar tax is seen to be a success, which the early indications, as you said, the most unsuccessful in raising revenue, but most successful in reformulation, suggests that it has been, it's got to be something that should be considered as an option, and clients should be planning for that or thinking about that.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because in the report itself, there's a really helpful pie chart which actually breaks down for you sort of how children consume sugar. And you see, the drinks, both soft drinks but also fruit juices and smoothies, are just over a quarter actually of what the average child is consuming, or where they're getting their sugar from. Well, that's probably all we have time for in our first discussion on this, but there'll be more coming in the second part of our video.